Hi, welcome to the Positive Psychology Voiceover PowerPoint on positive emotions. We're going to focus today on Barbara Fredrickson's Broaden-and-Build Theory. Next up will be your song, so pay attention. So as you come down from the daydream that you might be in after that song, uh, just a little refresher on what positive psychology has. There's three legs of the stool, so to speak, that are routes to happiness: the pleasant life, the good life, and the meaningful life. And each one builds off the other. The pleasant life leads to the good life leads to the meaningful life. So when you look at the pleasant life, the first building block to achieving the pleasant life is positive emotion. The good life is all about gratification. And then the meaningful life is something larger than the self. And when you've got all three of them, it's the full life. You're a fully functioning human being, as Carl Rogers would say. So meaning, engagement, and pleasure, actually going in the other way. So as we've said before, most of today's psychology focuses primarily on negative emotions. Psychopathology, anger, fear, jealousy. Look at the different things that we have. Anger management. How many things are tied in with anxieties and phobias, mental illness, mental disorders. Those are the negative aspects, and all involve negative emotions. So we're going to try to focus the other way around and look at the positive emotions. So when we look at emotion, you look at the root word, move, and know that emotions are not stagnant. They're not static. They move through us. When we look at Charles Darwin, and you look at evolutionary psychology, they talk in terms of these emotions aided survival. Because we were afraid, we avoided going in the cave where the bear or the saber-toothed tiger might be. So in that way, the emotions aided survival. Psychology, as we've said, primarily these days focuses on the negative emotions. But we really need to take a second look at Darwin and rethink it, because he only mentioned survival of the fittest twice in The Descent of Man. He talked 95 times about love, 92 times about moral sensitivity, and over 200 times about brain and mind. So it's not so much Darwin, it's how Darwin was presented to us about survival of the fittest and the evolutionary stature. And what they're saying is that the survival of the fittest is a domination system. One thing is better than another thing, is stronger than another thing, and so forth. And that is the opposite of a love system where people are egalitarian, take care of each other, have moral sensitivity, and care. So we need to actually rethink Darwin. There's a website at the Darwin Project headed up by David Loy. If you're interested, it can give you more information on that. Loy says we can change the world for better by changing the story we live by. That will become more clear as we talk about positive thinking in the upcoming weeks. So typically, emotions are tied to specific behavioral tendencies, dispositions. If we're afraid, we run. If we're angry, we attack something. If we're disgusted, we vomit or puke. Positive emotions, not so much. If we're joyous, what do we do? If we're grateful, what do we do? There's different ways different people express it, and different ways you express it at different times. So it's not as specific action tendency as the negative emotions are. Therefore, it's harder to define, harder to measure, etc. And the same thing goes on with us physiologically. If you're fear, if you're in anger, if you're disgusted, your blood pressure goes up, your respiration goes up. Those things don't necessarily happen when you're experiencing joy or gratitude or love. So again, hard to measure. So when we have that feeling component with fear, disgust, repulsion, ew, oh my, you want to get away from that. There's sights, sounds, and smells. Usually, if you talk about a smell, it's not very pleasant. Okay, if it's a pleasant smell, we usually refer to it as an aroma. But what's that smell? Yuck. There can be a thinking component. Somebody points a gun at you. You have a very narrow focus. What did the guy look like? I don't know. I saw this barrel of the gun. It took up my whole vision because you get focused straight in. And then the obvious fight or flight or conserve yourself, the action component. You've got to do something about it. So my wife, Joan, came up with the concept that emotion and imagination always win over logic and reason. And so you're starting to look into this from these building emotions. The next two videos give some perspective on how that impacts us as to what we believe and our ability, or quite often our inability, to be able to change our mind even when presented with facts that show us that what we believe is incorrect. So you can think back to the time when they believed the Earth was flat. When they first came out and said, no, it's not flat, it's a sphere. A whole lot of people had trouble believing that. Now, the second video shows a clip from The Daily Show, and this was during the run-up to the 2016 election of Donald Trump. So it's a little dated, and I want you to understand, even though that I'm that tree-hugging liberal you've heard about before, this is not about the politics of it. It's about the the belief system. And when presented with facts, people still ignore the facts and go with their emotion.
People believe a lot of things. In a survey, 1 in 5 people thought that the sun revolved around the Earth.
More than half think that they can magically sense someone staring at the back of their head.
And almost 1 in 10 believe Elvis is still alive.
What? So he's not alive?
Some false beliefs might make you laugh, but others are dangerous. Like the belief, debunked again this month, that vaccines cause autism. It turns out the researcher who made that claim, which caused some parents to stop vaccinating their kids, manipulated the data. There is no evidence vaccines cause autism. So I guess that means all those suspicious parents out there will now change their minds?
It's going to be a real challenge because once a view becomes hardened and people see it as the truth, it becomes really hard to dispel it.
Daniel Simons is an author and psychology professor at the University of Illinois. He says just because you confront a misconception with fact, don't think that people will automatically see the light. When the issue is our perceived safety, facts and logic often do not apply.
Many people think shark attacks are one of the leading causes of death in the summer, even though they almost never cause death. In fact, you're substantially more likely to die by having furniture fall on you.
It goes beyond the simple resistance to admitting you were wrong. It has to do with how ideas take root in our brains. When we first hear something, it gets processed in an area deep in our brain called the hippocampus. But as we think about it and remember it, it gets written more deeply into our cerebral cortex.
So, even though we can see that emotions can cloud us, because of that, when you become aware of that, we mistrust our emotions and we try to look at things reasonably. But when you approach things as if they're a win-loss or a zero-sum game, there's only one winner, there's only one loser. These are what the wedge issues are about in politics. It's either one or the other, and this is where our emotions take over. But you have to ask yourself, why do we have positive emotions? So evolutionarily, they've told us that we have negative emotions to protect us. Why do we have positive emotions? And who has them in abundance? And how can you add them to your life? And we're going to talk about those things right now. So when you experience positive emotions, and when you are experiencing them, we're more likely to help other people. We're more likely to be flexible in our thinking and come up to solutions with our problems. So you can see just from right there that positive emotions are very valuable. It doesn't mean you're not going to have negative emotions. Everybody has bad days. Everybody has hard times. Life happens. So don't get the false idea that you need to be happy all the time, that there's something wrong if you're not. I just want you to start paying attention to positive emotions and know how to put them in your storehouse. And this becomes clear with Barbara Fredrickson's work. And Barbara came up with the Broaden-and-Build Theory of positive emotions, which has become one of the mainstays in positive psychology. So, as I said before, the pleasant life begins with our positive emotions, and these are the ones that we talk about most of the time: gratitude, forgiveness, joy, savoring love, sharing good news, and so forth. Hope and optimism. These are all positive emotions. And so here's some of the thoughts from Fredrickson. The Broaden-and-Build Theory says that positive emotions appear to broaden people's momentary thought-action repertoires and build their enduring personal resources. Okay? And we talked about those specific action tendencies earlier with the negative emotions, the anger, you lash out, fear, you run, and so forth. So we want to call our mind to urge to act in a particular way. For example, as we said in the before, in a life-threatening situation, action tendencies describe negative emotions. But if it's a life-threatening situation, we don't usually have a positive emotion. There's no complementary effect there. Does that make sense? So Fredrickson talks about the discrete positive emotions like joy, contentment, love. Those positive emotions broaden our thought-action repertoires and build enduring personal resources. And both of these areas are very important if you think about it. They broaden our behaviors so that we use them more often, and they build our personal resources, our physical, intellectual, psychological, and social resources. Negative emotions have a tendency to narrow thinking, narrow attention, and focus on the negative. They can lead to pessimistic thinking, bad moods, which can ultimately lead to clinical depressions. They use up our personal resources. They can weaken our immune system, and if not make us sick, certainly keep us from getting well. Positive emotions, on the other hand, spiral up. They broaden our attention, our mindsets. They enhance our emotional well-being. They build our personal reserves, and those reserves become more durable. Now, one of the key parts of the Broaden-and-Build theory is the undo hypothesis. And I think this is even more important than some of the just the broadening effects. But if you have a buildup of positive emotions, a storehouse of positive emotions, they can undo the effect of negative emotions. So it's like hitting the undo button on your computer when you've made a mistake. So positive emotions enhance or fuel our resilience, okay? They enhance our positive affect, our ability to cope, and resilient people use that undo effect all the time. And this is what gives people grit. Remember, we talked about that in the last section, grit. In sports, we call it mental toughness. You know, how can you build up your strength and handle, be resilient, be persistent in your goals. So, in summary of the positive emotions, they broaden our thought-action repertoires. They undo negative emotions. They build up or fuel our psychological resilience. They trigger upward spirals to enhance well-being, enhance our creativity, they enhance our motivation, enhance our energy, our physical health. It just feels good to feel good. They help transform people for the better, and they're building blocks for optimal functioning, to be a fully functioning human. And they shorten the duration of the negative emotions. They can short circuit them so that they don't lead us into disease. So probably the easiest emotion to access, the easiest positive emotion to access is gratitude. It is my favorite, it's my go-to positive emotion. I will stop often during the day and think about something I'm grateful for. Looking out of the window of my office at Mill Mountain and the beautiful cloud formation, and just be grateful that I'm here and that I have this opportunity to help teach you about it. So gratitude is something that I use quite a bit, and we're going to talk. There's several interventions. Now these next ones are for you to know about, but that I'm not assigning them. Okay. There's one called the three blessings. It's also mentioned in your text. You think about a positive emotion in the past. Record every day for a week. Record three good things that happened to you, and then why they happened to you. So you can do that as a diary or a journal. And studies showed that after 3 months and 6 month follow-ups, people that did this were happier and less depressed. You could add this as you get into in the upcoming weeks. You're going to be having your journals for your compassion and loving kindness meditations, and you can add, while you're doing that, you can also think of three positive things and add that in. Sonia Liebermersky talks about a gratitude journal. So one time a week for 6 weeks, write down the things you're thankful for. Again, studies show the satisfaction with life significantly improved. It's very similar to the gratitude journal. So you don't have to wait for something extraordinary to happen. You can appreciate the ordinary, a sunset, just being with somebody, a good meal. These are all things, people say stop and smell the roses. And, even if you don't smell them, stop and look at their beauty. As you're down by the river, look at the magnolia trees and the blossoms that are on them. Gratitude, as I've said, is the most important or the easiest accessed positive emotion. So get used to using it. Get used to being grateful. It's said to have produced the most purely joyful moments that have been known to man. And, start off with a typical day with your first cup of coffee. Think about the way it warms you, wakes you up. Or when you take your dog for a walk, give a little child a piggyback ride. Be present in that gratitude. Feel it. Get used to it until that feeling it over and over becomes second nature. You want to program your emotions. Program them to be positive emotions. Fight against going to being negative all the time, angry, bitter, upset. Try to be positive. We've shown you the ways. I want to shift gears for a moment and get away from the emotional component, the components that drive us, and go back to the brain, neurology, for a few minutes, and talk about neuroplasticity. That's the ability of the brain to rewire, remap itself. Okay, and Jeff Schwartz out of UCLA came up with the term of self-directed neuroplasticity. And what he means is you can use your mind to change your brain, to change your mind for the better. I bring this up now because it's important to remember there is a negativity bias to the brain. It's evolutionary. It kept us from getting killed. We had to pay more attention to the negative than we do to the positive. So as a result, we have to work harder to get the positive information through, because our brain kind of has a negative bias. So Barbara Fredrickson says there's a positivity ratio that you have to have 3 positive impacts to overcome 1 negative impact. John Gottman, who does a lot of work with couples, says in a relationship that you have to have 5 positive inputs to overcome 1 negative input. A colleague of mine from the Pacific Institute, Joe Pace, said you had to have 11, his research showed you had to have 11 attaboys to overcome 1 you suck. So this, as we get into this, it's important to remember that we hang on to that negative. So Schwartz and others who have looked at this negativity bias say that just having a positive experience is not enough. Having a positive thought is not enough. They pass through the brain like water through a sieve, while the negative experiences are caught. So we have to engage positive experiences and actively weave them in to our brain. That would be part of the savoring exercise that you'll be doing. So that savoring is self-directed neuroplasticity. It's taking in the good, as Mark Hansen likes to say. You have to be mindful, control your attention, look for the positive facts, let them become positive experiences, savor that positive experience, revisit it, feel it in your body and your emotions, and intensify it. Now this takes practice, and after a while, you become more and more positive, and that positivity gets registered deeply in your emotional memory, which is what you want to be able to do. So what I recommend is when you find something that's positive, wallow in that positivity. It's like kids playing in a big pile of leaves, or on a cold night when you jump into a bed and get all snugly under the covers. My wife Joan likes to think about it, taking a mud bath, being all covered and warm with that mud bath. So you want to wallow in that positivity. Again, this is a way to help program your emotions. Savoring, you're going to have a savoring exercise to do in a week or two. Appreciating, really paying attention to what you're doing. Again, you don't have to do that all the time, but if you can do it some of the time, you'll be able to be more positive and take advantage of your positive emotions. So finally, I wanted to read this quote from Helen Keller. Helen Keller was born blind and deaf. She learned to talk and to be a great advocate for those without sight and without hearing. And she says, I wondered how it was possible to walk for an hour through the woods and see nothing of note. I who cannot see find hundreds of things. The delicate symmetry of a leaf, the smooth skin of a silver birch, the rough shaggy bark of a pine. I who am blind can give one hint to those who see. Use your eyes as if tomorrow you will have been struck blind. Hear the music of the voices, the songs of a bird, the mighty strains of an orchestra, as if you would be stricken deaf tomorrow. Touch each object as if tomorrow your tactile sense would fail. Smell the perfume of the flowers. Taste with relish each morsel, again, as if tomorrow you could never taste or smell again. Make the most of every sense. Glory in all the facets and pleasure and beauty which the world reveals to you. Now, granted, we can't do that all the time, but could you do it once a day? So make sure you keep up with your meditation, your autogenic training. You'll be going into the compassion and loving kindness meditation. Revisit the mindfulness meditation we did in the first week or two, where you get that leads you into the felt sense and the feelization, because I want you to be able to feel that positive emotion in your body. Feel the gratitude. Okay? So enjoy yourself, and I will speak with you soon.